Hello and welcome back to the Bright Founders Talk podcast from Temi. Temi is an international software development company that designs, builds, and delivers software for sustainable businesses and promising startups. My name is Chris, and today's guest is someone who has explored a wide range of industries, obtaining experience in the world of business from the perspective of different cultures, and is now giving back while establishing his own business. Robert Yan, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me, Chris.
Excellent. Pleasure to have you. So it's got a couple of questions. So the first one is, how do you normally start your day?
I like having a routine, much like I think many people. I think the idea always is that I'm very regimented about when I wake up, what I do first thing in the morning, what to eat, the coffee. All of that kind of gets you in the mood to start your day. I have two school-age children, so there's a little bit of that situation going on to get them
A bit of a scramble in the morning.
Exactly. But then, I do prefer getting up a little bit earlier and then getting a head start on the day.
Nice. Okay. And are you up I know you said you got two young children, but before that, would you always be sort of an early riser, like a 6 a.m.er, or not that early?
Yeah. It's 6 a.m., 5 a.m. Just have trouble sleeping much beyond that. So I like getting up in the morning. I like maybe even doing a little bit of work, clearing out the emails from overnight, and then putting away the devices, I think, for a little bit of time.
Right.
So you can do a little bit of morning reading, getting the kids ready, like I said, that kind of thing.
Okay. All right. Interesting. What piece of software or tech couldn't you live without?
Yeah, I think it's got to be the laptop. I think I could live even without the phone. I can live without social media. I tried at one point moving from a computer to a tablet. Didn't work out. So I think that's got to be the answer. I'm a little bit old school.
Okay. Was it just a laptop just to correspond with people, or do you, I suppose, you enjoy using it for entertainment as well?
No, I like having the keyboard. I like having, the capability to store things. It's the laptop.
Okay. And the final one, what did you want to be when you were growing up?
Oh man, that's a tough one. All sorts of different, I think, careers in mind. From school-age kid in the U.S., everything from sort of traditional, firefighter, pilot, all of this kind of stuff as a young kid, to being an athlete. None of those things worked out, so here we are.
Okay, like many of us, yeah. It's you dream big, and then, you never know.
Exactly.
So, where did you grow up exactly?
So I was born in China. I immigrated to the U.S. when I was 6 years old with my parents. So I grew up in Texas in the U.S. All throughout primary school and secondary school.
Okay, just because a little bit what we'll come on to later and talk about your own business, Fana, or the one you co-founded. I want to just start at the beginning, growing up and that kind of thing. Did you have a strong sense of community where you grew up? Did everybody know everybody? Was, very helpful with each other? Is that something that you had from an early age?
I would say yes and no. I think there is an element that I grew up in a relatively suburban part of the U.S. I think as stereotypical suburban U.S. with minivans and SUVs and soccer practice, as we like to say. As you could imagine. So there is an element of community from just your neighbors, your friends, school friends, family friends, this kind of thing. At the same time, there was also an element that we were immigrants in a country, right? At which point you are talking about having to learn how to blend into and sort of assimilate into a totally different lifestyle and community that you were perhaps not used to.
Okay, interesting. So there was some sense, I suppose in suburban, sort of residential areas, there's always a sense of, getting together and having different events and, helping your neighbor and that kind of thing. All right. I think would contrast quite a lot with your studies, because then you went to Cornell University and studied in in New York. So what was it like studying in New York? Did you find it a big jump from suburban lifestyle, or what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the impetus of that was obviously just to try and live as far away from where you grew up as possible. Not for any bad reason, but just to explore different things. Cornell actually is a fairly rural part of the U.S., pretty far away from New York City, where I eventually ended up to start my career. But yeah, it was a big jump, being alone, but it was exciting, right?
Okay, good. And what inspired you to study engineering then? Where did that come from?
My father was an engineer. He was a mechanical engineer. I chose to be an electrical engineer. Always enjoyed tinkering with electronics, computers as a kid, and thought that would give that a go for university.
Because again, we're still just mentioning, well, just referring to your business later.
Yeah.
Well, was there a sense that was using engineering? Were you hoping to get to that point, or was it just you were not sure what you wanted to do exactly and you just did something you were good at and hopefully things would work out? Or did you have a goal in mind?
Yeah, I think it was closer to not knowing what you wanted to do and just choosing a study that was fairly open-ended. I think the U.S. education system is perhaps a little different than many others in the world, where you're not necessarily sort of pigeonholed into the major that you choose, right? I know lots of engineers that became finance people, lots of biology majors that became engineers, and vice versa, right? So the idea was that engineering gave me a relatively strong foundation of problem solving skills. I think this type of skill set is quite useful kind of no matter what you do, right?
Do you think that's because, you live in London, right? At the moment, I believe.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if in the UK, I think you are, like you said, pigeonholed in terms of you study this, you will go on to do that major or that degree as your profession. So do you think that's the advantage that sort of the US has over, because you've lived in different countries, so have you noticed that the US has advantage in business because they are a bit more flexible with allowing people to go into different careers and that kind of thing?
I think that the any advantage in business the U.S. might have over Europe is more due to, I would say, more friendly sort of business regulatory framework rather than the children themselves. I think having being born in Asia, having lived in Asia, I do see that there is a much a much stronger focus in Asia, at least compared to the U.S., with fundamental math and science as an education to pursue versus the U.S., which is much more wide open. So I think there's definitely pros and cons to both of those. Having a wide open path to figure out what you want to do and discover is, I think, pretty magical. It's something that you can't really replace in any other setting. However, a lot of people could also use the guidance to say you should be doing this and you're good at doing this.
Sounds nice. It's nice to have many options, right? I don't think that's something I experienced myself, unfortunately, but interesting. Now, after you graduated, you went on to become an associate analyst, right? That was your first job. And I was just curious, how did you cope in your first job? What was the first couple of weeks or, I don't know, first couple of months like in your career, right? How did you get on?
Yeah, so worked in a consulting job in a relatively large company. It's the first and only, I would say, large company I've ever worked in. The positive of that was that it was in New York City. So lots of things to do and explore. You were also part of an incoming freshman class, as it were, of analysts and associates. So you had a sense of community from that perspective. And yeah, so did consulting for a year.
Okay, cool. And so like you said, with the there was a strong link between the university and the first sort of step into the world of business? Because sometimes it's quite hard to, take the theory and then do the practical. But in your case, it wasn't like that. It was quite smooth, the transition.
Yeah. It was a relatively smooth transition. Got a lot of practical training around type of skill sets that would have been required. And the fact that I didn't have a degree in exactly what I ended up doing, I don't think was a detriment. In fact, perhaps you could view it as a positive in the sense that you were able to think a little bit outside the box at certain times and not be sort of super restricted to one type of thinking, right?
Okay. Very sounds good. So after that, you still, I wasn't really sure. Maybe you could explain what happened after that in terms of the next step in your career, because it was a longer position, right, of 11 years.
Yeah.
You in New York and Hong Kong, or what happened there?
Yeah, exactly. So I joined a small private equity investment company first in New York. Was in New York for around 5 years or so, I think, with that company. Had an opportunity right after the global financial crisis in 2009 to go and pursue setting up, in essence, the Asian office or the Asian headquarters for that business. So moved out with myself, my wife, and our 2-year-old to Hong Kong at the time without having been there. And it was an exciting journey. So we were in Hong Kong for 7 years, built up that business, doing reasonably the same set of activities as in New York. And then, so that was sort of career path number 2.
In terms of jumping from New York, and obviously you grew up in New York and then went to Hong Kong, did you have to sort of adapt at all to the way you work, or was it, because I know it's still the same business, so maybe it was exactly the same, or did you have to kind of change anything you did?
Yeah, I mean, pace in Asia is very, very fast, especially Hong Kong. I think there's an element of just because the city is so dense and there's so many people in one very concentrated location doing relatively similar industry. I think there is an element of that everything is very, very fast paced, right? It's one thing that, and having moved to the UK, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but having gone through COVID, I do notice, and I lament a little bit that, even 5 years ago, you could call up someone that you did not know very well and say, do you want to go sit for a coffee and talk about something for 15 minutes? And that was a very common thing to do. It was very, warmly received most times. That's how people introduced themselves and conducted business. And then obviously fast forward to 2023, and there is a lot of, let's set up a conversation in a week or two over something like Zoom, where you lose a lot of the human touch, right? And the spontaneity and a lot of the face-to-face kind of interaction, right? So, I think fundamentally, we were doing investments and finance in New York, in Hong Kong, and even in London. So the job itself is relatively similar. However, the pace and the style of working is quite drastically different and has shifted over time as well, right?
Wow, so yeah, very interesting, because I imagine New York is like the king of hustle and bustle, but Hong Kong even more so. I mean, I've only spent a few days there on holiday, and I did notice obviously it's so densely populated, but also very exciting. As Hong Kong is, like you said, it's densely populated and there's lots of businesses everywhere. So when you went there to start up the sort of, to build the Asian market for that business, how was that then? Because I suppose it was quite saturated, or did you find a niche for yourself, or were you networking very well, like you said?
Yeah, we definitely had a specific area that we were focused on that perhaps others were not. We also went specifically to help build out and help support a business that we had invested in. right? So there was a little bit of operational work as well involved in, in essence, building a business or rebuilding a business, let's say, that we had invested in from the ground up. So that was all super exciting. It's like you said, a very saturated market from the finance and investment perspective. However, yeah, exactly. We found a very specific area focused in financial services, equipment, operating, leasing that not a lot of others were doing. And again, you have to imagine this is 2010, 11, just coming out of what was the largest kind of recessionary period for the world had seen in a long time, right? And so there was a lot of opportunity to meet people, and people were very open to look at opportunities.
Yeah, I suppose that's true, isn't it? Whenever you have sort of this downturn, there's always opportunity that you can take advantage of. While you were in Hong Kong, this first experience, building another sort of business or establishing yourself there, are there any skills that you learnt or you obtained during that time that you still use today in your own business?
For sure. I think, for sure. I think at the end of the day, building any business is, you can have any amount of technical skills, but it is all very interpersonal in how to deal with people, right? I think there are very few companies, industries where you can kind of ignore that element. Again, despite how distant everyone has sort of become post pandemic, post this digital age, I still think the capability to deal with, manage different personalities, people. I mean, that's something that I learned a tremendous a lot in Hong Kong, both dealing with colleagues, dealing with people that are working for you, dealing with people that you reported to, dealing with outside people. I think these are all things that carry over, right?
So then the next step, you went on to work with Kui Logistics.
Oh yes,
in London.
Yes.
Is that London? That's London.
So we had London invested. Yeah, so during that period of time, we had invested in a couple of companies in Vietnam, in India, and then we spent quite a bit of time with those companies on the operational side. Again, in terms of starting something, helping them grow and scale, and so that was the role at Kui.
Did you live in those countries, or did you visit often, or was it just more from far that you were operating?
Yeah, I was from Hong Kong, but Hong Kong to Vietnam is only an hour. So that was a very common trip that I made. Again, at the time, I was probably flying and traveling 200 to 250 days a year. So that was a pretty hectic schedule, kind of going in and out to a lot of these places. And again, that's obviously, changed last couple of years, right? People do a lot less of that.
So you'd have to renew your passport as often now. The pages don't get filled up as much. So
exactly,
there's always a benefit.
Exactly.
Well, because I wanted to, you, based on what I found out, obviously you grew up in the US. You told us you were born in China, Hong Kong, India, Vietnam, and now London. Just wanted to know, to kind of ask you, how did you go from investment and logistics to becoming a little bit more involved in people and how they work? And because I want to kind of move into talk about Fana very shortly. So how did you become interested in people instead of just investment, let's say?
Yeah, so I think there's probably two parts to that. The first is that the idea always was that we were investing, and we always would get involved with the companies we were investing in, and we would operate within those businesses depending on what was required, right? So whether you had to step in and fulfill a finance role or a technology role or a strategic role, that's what we did anyways. And the ambition always was to take what you learned from those businesses and then obviously build out something yourself, right? The second part of it, obviously, is we came to London in 2018, looking again at investment opportunities in broader Europe. The fact that this global pandemic happened that shut everyone down, changed many industries, just drastically changed, let's say, how a lot of people perceive themselves, right? Created whole new industries, destroyed lots of old industries. All of these things brought upon, I think, a lot of self-reflection about what I wanted to do, right? Around the same time, we started also seeing, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, but we started seeing a couple businesses involved with charity donations at checkout, this kind of thing. We didn't really like what they had to offer, and we sort of said, look, there's definitely something here at the intersection of, like you said, people, community, giving back, intertwined with consumption. We just didn't feel like the existing tools that were in place, very effectively implemented that, right? So we said we think we can build something better. So that's what we sort of set out to do.
What is Fana? And like you said, it's interesting. How is it different then from what you found before? Then what's the USP?
Yeah, exactly. So I think, I'll answer your second question first, which is how is it different and from what exists, right? Fundamentally, it is a platform that connects charities, brands and merchants, and consumers, right? Or everyday people. And the existing tools in place, I think, fulfilled the requirements of either the charities, helping them fundraise from lots of people, or fulfilled the requirements of merchants and brands, which is a lot of brands said, hey, we need a CSR component in our business because everyone's talking about CSR and giving back. So typically what we saw, at least in recent times, was some type of giving back event tied to a purchase, right? So this could be anything from I'm shopping for a t-shirt online and they promise that they'll plant a tree for every t-shirt I buy. It could be in the form of I'm checking out at, Tesco's, and then there's a roundup to donate to, the charity that they're supporting. It could be that you're flying on a flight and, the airline comes with a little envelope and says, the leftover coins you have, please put it in, right? So those were tools that help the businesses kind of align a little bit more with the giving back they wanted to do. But what we sort of realized is that none of these tools that existed actually brought the consumer's mindset into play, right? So the fact that I round up at checkout, the fact that you plant a tree when I purchase something, I'm never actually asked if that's what I want, right? I'm never, and even if it was something that was done for me, so you plant a tree for me, you might think that, having an environmental goal is something that's, it is a good thing, but you might think that you've done that because it helps you align with your customers as a merchant, but you've not really asked the question and you've not really found out if that's what they care about, or if you're consumers, they could be more into other causes, right, that are equally as important.
Yeah, I think that's something that I saw on Fana's website about, choosing your charity. And I thought it was really interesting because, like you said, I would be more inclined to, I would feel more a part of something if I chose what I'm passionate about, for example. So it's quite a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think not only do you feel more passionate about something if it's aligned with your interests, I think there is a growing sense of, that impact should be part of your digital identity, right? Whereas, historically it's how many followers you have and how many, how much money you make, right? And I think going forward, especially for younger generations, all of those things are still important, but I think there is going to be an element of how much good I can bring back into the world. That becomes an ever increasing sort of standard of sort of a badge of what I'm judged on as well, right? So if that is the case, then the goal here is that what is the easiest way? What is the way that incentivizes, everyday people to participate in this sharing economy?
So it's kind of, yeah, like you say, a badge of honor, kind of something you can say, I'm doing, this is what I've done so far compared to your friends, or that kind of thing, at the same time helping other people.
Yeah, it doesn't even
Sounds
have
really
to be
interesting.
a competitive thing, but almost you might be into the environmental causes, but I might be into preservation of wildlife, right? And then somebody else might be into um, social causes, right? So all of these things
Mm.
are all important, right? So it's more of a it's less of a, I did more than you or you did more than me, but it's closer to a, hey, this is an area that you care about. This is an area that I care about. Oh, we have something in common. This is something that we can obviously now talk about, right?
Yeah, I see. What was the starting Fana? What was the most unexpected challenge?
The most unexpected challenge is that uh, we did not start out as a consumer company. We started out as a business that fundamentally said we will give you a reward wallet for merchants and brands that, at checkout, when you purchase something, you can give back to your consumers by depositing some money into their reward wallet. And then you let the consumer kind of make the allocation of, like you said, what causes you are more passionate about, right? And the challenge is that we've now kind of moved into, it's still a B2B business, but also a consumer business where we're issuing a debit card for consumers that they can spend on every single purchase and sort of earn rewards and money to give back to charity with every single purchase. So the pivot from pure business to business to uh, also including consumers, that's obviously been a pretty monumental thing to handle, right?
Yeah, I could imagine. And I think talking about sort of making it more between not just businesses, but between consumers, is that why you started to integrate the card designs, which are very cool? I'm not really sure I could explain them, but they're very colorful and, you
Yeah.
know, lots of animals and that kind of thing. I was thinking if I had one of these cards, I probably would never lose my card because normally it's quite a mundane color, like a black one. And then you
Right.
drop it on the floor and you can't find it. Whereas,
Yeah.
these ones are very eye catching. So is that why you decided to go down that route of, also combining art into the reward that, it was kind of to grab people's or consumers' attention?
Yeah, exactly. I think less to grab attention, but more to say that there's no reason that payment cards have to be boring, right? I think we can include an element of creating designs, community-led art that reflects you. Even the artwork that we're issuing for the first batch of cards, they were not purely decided by us. We, gave our community lots of different options, and they sort of chose this is the artwork that we want, right? And the idea would be that the more impact that you um, create, the more that you give back, would allow a consumer to sort of unlock brand new designs and this kind of thing. So I think we have a lot in store of how we'd like to use that art to incentivize people to, at the end of the day, create sort of a better place to live in the world, right?
Mm.
But yeah, the art is an important part of it.
Yeah. Okay. It's very cool. And just the final thing then, in general, what advice would you give to someone who wants to have a similar career path as yours? What would you say?
Ultimately, I think the where I see lots of young people get maybe a little bit stuck is that they feel like they can't make mistakes, right? That they need to sort of say, um, I'm this or I'm that, or I identify as this career path or that, right? Whereas I think it's just try something. If it works out, that's great. If it doesn't work out, it's also good because you've learned something, right? The progression to, building a business or in any career is the sum of the journey, right? It's pretty cliched thing, but it's that's much more important than kind of where you are at the end of the day, I feel like.
Okay, kind of just enjoying the journey rather
Yeah.
than focusing on the end goal. All right, brilliant. Well, I wish you all the best with Fana. Thanks for joining us today, and it was thoroughly interesting. So, all the best.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.